One soldier, one dog, one laundromat at midnight. No one was supposed to be there, but Ranger stopped, ears up, tail still, eyes locked on the row of machines. And then they heard it. A whisper. Not loud, not clear, just 4 words, barely a breath. "Please, don't leave me." Curled between metal and cold tile was a little girl, alone, shaking, forgotten. She didn't cry, she didn't run, because part of her had already given up. But not them. What happened next? It'll break your heart and then teach it how to beat again. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your country below. Let's see how far one act of kindness can go. Houston didn't sleep, at least not in the way other cities did. It tossed and turned under the weight of its own restless silence. That particular night, the sky hung low, pressing down with thick winter fog that rolled in from the bayou, wrapping everything in a dull gray hush. The street lamps bled amber halos into the mist, flickering like tired eyes refusing to close. Rain hadn't come yet, but the air was swollen with it, clinging to windshields and window panes with sticky resolve. On the southeast edge of the city, not far from the railroad that sliced through the industrial blocks, stood a strip of aging buildings. Most were shuttered by midnight, their neon signs buzzed out, windows barred or papered over with years of forgotten hope. But the Linden Wash and Dry Laundromat remained lit, its fluorescent glow buzzing like a tired mosquito, cutting through the haze in hollow defiance. Jack Lawson stepped out of his rusted Chevy pickup and pulled the hood of his army green field jacket over his short-cropped, dark blonde hair. He stood still for a moment, gloved hands in his pockets, his breath forming slow clouds in the cold. He looked lean, wiry even, like a man who never fully adjusted to civilian life. 40 years old, but worn beyond his age, his face was a map of battles fought both overseas and in his own head. He had a strong jaw, a thin scar along the left side of his temple that disappeared beneath his beard's stubble, and sharp eyes the color of pale steel, always alert, always searching. PTSD clung to him like an unwelcome shadow. Most days he managed. Some nights, like this one, he didn't sleep at all. Ranger, his dog, hopped down from the passenger seat and stood beside him, alert. The German Shepherd was large and disciplined, fur thick and brindled with streaks of ash and charcoal. His left ear had a slight fold, an old injury from a blast in Helmand Province. Once a military K-9, Ranger had pulled Jack out from the rubble when an IED detonated under their convoy. Both had survived. Neither left the war untouched. Jack clicked his tongue. "Let's walk." The streets were empty, aside from a few wind-strewn flyers and the occasional flicker of movement in distant alleyways. Ranger trotted forward with confidence, nose twitching, eyes sweeping like a sentinel. They passed a shuttered pawn shop, a broken vending machine, and finally stopped across from the laundromat. It wasn't in their usual route, but tonight Ranger turned toward it, ears perked. Jack narrowed his eyes. The neon open sign flickered red. "Middle of the night, and someone still running spin cycles," Jack muttered. Ranger gave a quiet bark, the kind he reserved for something unusual. Then he walked up to the glass door and sat down. His tail didn't wag. He simply stared inside. Jack followed, pulled the door open, and let Ranger lead. The place smelled like bleach and rust, and the long-forgotten traces of dryer sheets. Machines thudded rhythmically. Someone had left a load running. In the back corner, a metal folding table groaned under the weight of abandoned clothes. Rows of humming washers lined the walls, and cracked linoleum tiles dulled the fluorescent glare. Jack was about to turn and leave when Ranger let out a short, sharp whine and padded toward one of the washers in the middle row. There, between the spinning drums, was a small figure. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, was curled up on the cold tile floor, her back pressed against the side of the washer like it was a warm body. She wore a pink jacket several sizes too large, sleeves rolled over tiny hands that clutched a red plastic shopping bag. Her jeans were dirty, shoes untied, and her hair, dark brown and tangled, fell across her face in limp strands. Her cheeks were hollow, lips slightly parted as she slept with the kind of stillness that comes only from deep exhaustion. A faint bruise, old and fading, marked the edge of her jaw. Jack froze. His breath caught for just a second, an involuntary flicker of memory. His daughter, Lily, would have turned 8 this year. She used to sleep on the living room rug, curled up with the dog when she refused to go to bed. But Lily was gone now, taken in a car crash 3 years ago while Jack was deployed. Another absence war couldn't protect him from. Jack crouched low, careful not to startle the girl. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. No movement. "Are you okay?" Still nothing. Her chest rose and fell steadily, but her grip on the bag didn't loosen. Inside, he could just make out a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing and a pack of crackers crushed into dust. He didn't touch her. He knew better. Jack slowly pulled a sandwich from his coat pocket, the one he had brought along to eat during their aimless walk, and placed it gently beside her bag. Then he reached into his wallet and took out an old business card, blank on one side. Using a pen from his jacket, he wrote, "My name is Jack. If you need help, call this number. No one will hurt you." He tucked it beside the sandwich, just within reach. Ranger stood silently beside them, eyes locked on the girl as if keeping guard. Jack looked around again. No cars outside, no footsteps, no adult voices. Just the soft hum of washers and the cold hum of the city at rest. As he stood, he hesitated. This wasn't his business. He'd told himself that for years, about other things, about people he couldn't save, about not getting too close. But tonight, something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the way she clutched the bag, like it was the only thing in the world that still belonged to her. Or maybe it was Ranger, who now lay down beside her, as if refusing to leave. Jack gave one last look before backing away. He clicked his fingers, and Ranger reluctantly stood. They walked out together into the damp fog. Behind them, the girl didn't stir. But as the door closed with a quiet chime, Jack glanced back through the window. The red plastic bag had been pulled slightly closer to her chest. 3 days later, the rain returned to Houston. Not the torrential kind that lashed with fury, but a steady, bone-deep drizzle that soaked through every layer and made even the strongest souls feel just a little smaller. The sky was a sheet of muted steel, the clouds so thick they swallowed the daylight whole, turning noon into dusk. On Maple Avenue, puddles shimmered like cracked glass between uneven sidewalk slabs. Jack Lawson parked his truck across from the West Haven Community Center, engine idling, windshield wipers clicking in rhythmic resistance to the rain. He hadn't planned to be here. In truth, he'd driven aimlessly for an hour, unsure whether he was looking for the girl or the piece he hadn't found since that night in the laundromat. Ranger sat quietly in the passenger seat, ears twitching, eyes scanning the slow-moving line forming under the rusted awning beside the center. Jack sipped from a lukewarm cup of black coffee, watching. That's when he saw her. The same tangled brown hair, the same oversized pink jacket. The girl stood seventh in line, her back hunched against the cold, arms wrapped tightly around that red plastic bag as though it held her breath inside. Her jeans were darker now, soaked through. Mud caked the hem, and her shoes squelched every time she shifted. She didn't talk to anyone. She didn't move except to pull her bag closer when the man behind her shuffled forward. Jack stared, heart pressing into his ribs. "She's here," he said aloud, voice low. Ranger perked up, nose twitching. Without another thought, Jack stepped out into the rain, pulling his hood up. The water hit him in cold pinpricks, but he didn't feel it. His boots splashed through shallow puddles as he crossed the street. He didn't want to frighten her, not again. But even as he approached, the girl must have sensed him. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, everything stilled. Her eyes, hazel, wide, ringed with red, locked onto his. Recognition sparked, but not the comforting kind. Hers was a look of fight or flight. Then, without a word, she turned and bolted down the side alley next to the shelter, red bag bouncing against her leg, water spraying behind her. "Wait!" Jack shouted. And instinctively Ranger surged ahead, leash trailing behind like a line to memory. Jack ran. The alley was narrow, walls stained with mildew and old graffiti. Trash bags sagged against dumpsters, and the air smelled of rotting food and burnt plastic. Ranger disappeared around the corner, barking once, a short, sharp alert. Jack skidded around, nearly slipping on a slick patch of grease, and saw Ranger sitting motionless in the mouth of a dead-end corridor, tail stiff, gaze fixed on a figure in the shadows. A man sat there, cross-legged on flattened cardboard boxes, half sheltered by a warped sheet of metal leaned against the brick wall. His clothes were a patchwork of years and hardship, a fraying denim jacket over 2 sweatshirts, pants duct-taped at the knees. His beard was thick and white with streaks of yellow, and his skin was a deep weathered brown, like old bark. Rain dripped from the rim of the torn cowboy hat perched on his head. He looked up as Jack arrived, calm, even curious. "You're not the first to chase her," the man said, voice low and rough with years. "But you're the first she didn't bite." Jack caught his breath, chest heaving from the sprint. "She came this way. Did she pass you?" The man nodded toward the other end of the alley. "Like a ghost with feet. She's fast, but not too fast for your mutt." "His name's Ranger." "Figured. Military, huh?" "Retired." "Thought so." The man adjusted his hat. "She ain't dangerous, just scared. Name's Leroy, by the way. Most folks here call me Ghost." "I sleep where the rain forgets to fall." Jack gave a slow nod. "I'm Jack." Leroy tilted his head, studying him. "You the one who left her the sandwich?" Jack's jaw tightened. "She kept it?" "No, she threw it away. But she read the card, kept it, tucked it into her shoe like it was gold." Jack looked down the alley, heart thudding slower now. "Do you know her name?" "Emily. Emily Grace." Leroy's eyes softened. "She's been floating around for a couple weeks. Mostly keeps to herself. Don't talk to no one. Sleeps near the laundromat sometimes. Says she's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Leroy shrugged, a sad gesture. "For her dad to come back. Says he left her at the bus station. Promised he'd be right back. Never showed." Jack leaned against the wall, rain dripping from his jacket onto the cracked concrete. He didn't speak right away. "I had a daughter," he said finally. "About her age. Lost her while I was overseas. Driver ran a red light. I wasn't there." Leroy didn't reply, just nodded once, slow and knowing. They stood in silence for a moment, broken only by the distant sound of tires hissing against wet asphalt and the occasional splash of rainwater off a loose gutter. Ranger sat beside them, tail still, eyes scanning as if watching for more than just movement. "She ain't scared of your dog," Leroy said. "That's something." "She called him a hero doggy once," Jack said, almost smiling. Leroy reached into a side pocket and pulled out a damp, slightly torn granola bar. He tossed it to Ranger, who sniffed it once before gently taking it in his teeth. "You're gonna try to find her again?" Leroy asked. Jack looked up, eyes steady. "Yeah, I can't not." Leroy leaned back against the wall, exhaling a long, tired breath. "Then don't chase her. Let her find you. Kids like that. They don't run because they're bad. They run because the world taught them that standing still gets you hurt." Jack nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "I won't push," he said, "but I won't disappear either." Leroy gave a tired smile. "Then maybe she'll stop running." Jack turned to leave, giving Ranger a soft pat. As they stepped back into the drizzle, Leroy's voice floated behind him. "She's got a piece of you now. You leave, she'll feel it." Back on the sidewalk, the line for breakfast had moved forward. Emily was gone, of course, but her place, seventh in line, was still open, like the rain had etched her absence into the rhythm of the city. Jack stood there, soaked to the bone, watching that empty spot, wondering how long a child could wait before giving up hope. The night came down heavy, dragging the cold with it like a wet shroud over the city. November in Houston wasn't supposed to bite like this, but the wind howled between buildings, threading through alleyways and rattling old window panes. Jack Lawson zipped his coat up to his neck as he stepped over a cracked sidewalk, his boots splashing quietly through a thin sheet of water. The rain hadn't stopped for hours, just fell softer now, more like a steady whisper than a storm. Ranger trotted ahead, nose to the ground, focused. The dog's black and tan coat was damp, but his energy hadn't flagged. His movements were fluid, ears high and alert. Jack let the leash drag loose. Ranger didn't need it. He was tracking something, or someone. 2 hours earlier, Jack had parked outside the laundromat again, hoping to spot the girl, Emily. He hadn't seen her in the shelter line that morning. The 7th spot remained empty, and that silence had nagged at him all day. Leroy had mentioned she sometimes slept where the wind don't reach, which didn't give him much, but Ranger seemed to pick up something. He'd led them through the south end, weaving past scrapyards and forgotten rail spurs, until they found a gap in the fence behind an abandoned warehouse. Now, between 2 graffiti-covered shipping containers rusting in a narrow dead-end lot, Ranger stopped. Jack came to his side. A blue tarp had been stretched across the mouth of one of the containers, weighed down with bricks at the bottom corners. Its edges flapped gently in the wind. A shopping cart lay tipped over nearby, stuffed with odds and ends. Plastic bottles, a broken umbrella, a torn blanket. Jack crouched low and lifted the tarp slightly. The beam of his flashlight revealed a small figure curled near the far wall of the container. Emily. She was asleep, her back resting against a layer of cardboard, arms wrapped around the same red plastic bag. The stuffed rabbit poked from one side, its fabric stained and threadbare. Her face was pale, her lips chapped. A slight tremble rippled through her small frame. Jack slowly stepped inside, Ranger following quietly. The floor was gritty with dust and damp in the corners. Jack pulled off his backpack and set it down softly. From it, he took a folded fleece blanket, a soft scarf, and a sandwich in a Ziploc bag. He placed them gently beside her without a word. Then he sat, resting his back against the wall across from her. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched her breathe. Emily whimpered in her sleep. "Dad, don't go!" The sound hit Jack like a knife under the ribs. His mind snapped backward. Hospital lights, beeping machines, his daughter Lily's small hand limp in his palm, the voicemail he missed because of a delayed flight, the words he'd never heard from her again. He blinked hard, trying to steady his breath. Emily twitched and shifted, her small hand brushing the sandwich. Jack reached out, just a gentle touch, fingertips aiming for her shoulder, a small gesture to let her know she wasn't alone. But the second he made contact, Emily jolted upright with a scream. Her eyes were wide, wild with fear, and before he could even say her name, she was backing into the corner, scrambling, her voice hoarse. "Don't! I didn't steal anything! I swear!" Jack held his hands up. "Emily, it's okay. You're safe." She didn't believe him. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her fingers clenched around the red bag. "I'm not here to take you anywhere," Jack said, his voice low, calm. I brought you some things." "I didn't ask you to," she shouted. "I know." Ranger whined softly and lay down, head resting between his paws. Emily looked at the dog, then back to Jack. Jack stayed seated, his posture relaxed. "You remember Ranger?" She didn't reply, but she stopped backing away. "It's raining again," Jack said after a beat. "I figured you could use something warm." Emily glanced down at the blanket and sandwich. Then she burst into tears. Not loud, just the kind of shaking sobs a child makes when they've held in too much for too long. Jack didn't move closer. He waited. Minutes passed. Eventually she sat down again, curled against the wall, the red bag cradled to her chest like it was keeping her heart from falling apart. She didn't speak again. Jack stayed another 15 minutes before quietly exiting the container with Ranger. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd be back tomorrow. Later that night, Jack sat on the tailgate of his truck under a flickering streetlight and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked across one corner. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name, Dr. Mark Reyes. He tapped the number and waited. Mark answered on the second ring, voice scratchy with fatigue. "You picking a weird hour to call, brother." "She's real," Jack said. There was a pause. "The girl?" "Yeah, I found her tonight." Mark Reyes was Jack's closest friend, a former Army medic turned veterinarian. Mark had a voice like smooth gravel and a face that carried both humor and hurt. Filipino-American, late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a sharp widow's peak and sleeves of faded tattoos down both arms. He ran a rescue clinic out of a converted church on Houston's west side. He also used to say that Jack should stop treating life like a war zone. "She let you near?" Mark asked. "No, I tried." She panicked. "You think she's in danger?" Jack stared at the rain dripping off his tailgate. "She's already been in danger. Now I think she's just surviving." There was a beat of silence. Then Mark said, "You want me to come by tomorrow? Bring supplies?" "Yeah, and maybe you talk to a shelter rep, quietly." Mark chuckled. "So you're in this now." "I think I was in it the second I saw her." Mark didn't reply for a few seconds. Then, "I'll bring what I can. And Jack, don't push her. Let her come to you." Already learned that the hard way. As he hung up, Jack looked out at the sleeping city, wondering how many more children were out there right now, curled up in metal boxes, clutching bags full of broken toys and waiting for someone who'd never come. He whispered to no one in particular, "I'm not walking away." The morning sky over Vandale was a dull canvas of cloud, smeared with light that never quite turned golden. Inside Rowan's house, the tension had taken on a new shape, heavier than curiosity, sharper than fear. The collar with the ARCSA logo now sat on the kitchen table like a loaded question. Rowan, still in yesterday's flannel, stared at it over a half-empty mug of coffee gone tepid hours ago. Across from him, Tessa tapped her phone with clinical focus. Her blazer was folded neatly over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She had always been this way, deliberate, stubborn, skeptical of anything that didn't come with a citation. But something about Nairo had loosened her logic, even if just slightly. "You said there was a scannable code on the underside?" she asked, glancing up. Rowan turned the collar and pointed. "There, just beneath the adjustment buckle, too small to notice unless you really looked." Tessa angled her phone and the device chirped. Within seconds, a screen loaded. Minimalist in design, but guarded behind multiple encryption layers. She frowned. "This is high level. It's not public-facing." She tried a series of workarounds, using legal tools from her law firm's database. 5 minutes later, a logo materialized. Project Neurosynth, ARCA Biological Integration Division, confidential access only. Rowan's throat tightened. "What the hell is Neurosynth?" "Give me a second," she muttered. The file structure was extensive, dozens of folders labeled with cold technical terms. Emotional response calibration, genetic integration trials, behavioral sync logs. But it was one file, titled Alpha Companion Trial, Year 2, that drew their eyes. Tessa opened it, and an image filled the screen. A sterile room, lit by white LED panels, a sleek examination table, and beside it, sitting calmly with an expression far too thoughtful for any animal, was Nero. But that wasn't what made Rowan stagger back. Seated next to Nairo, hand resting gently on its massive shoulder, was a woman with storm gray eyes and dark copper hair pulled into a loose braid. Her smile was gentle. Her name was Alara, his wife. The same wife who had vanished without explanation 3 years ago. Tessa's eyes widened as she looked from the screen to her brother. "Rowan." He couldn't speak. He sank slowly into the chair, breath catching. That wasn't just proof that Nairo wasn't a dog. It was a severed thread connecting to something he'd buried. Or tried to. "Alara worked for ARCA," he whispered, almost to himself. Tessa nodded slowly. "She never told you?" "She said she worked in advanced neural tech. I thought that meant prosthetics, not..." He glanced toward Nero, lying silently in the next room, golden eyes watching from the hallway like he understood every word. Tessa opened another folder. Documents spilled across the screen. Neural imprint mapping, empathy model encoding, keywords like transference threshold, and biological mirror recognition. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Nero hadn't just been trained by Alara. He had been built, grown, under her supervision. Later that afternoon, Rowan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Rowan Edivane?" "Speaking." "This is Miles Keegan. I run a channel called Unknown Earth. You may have seen one of my clips going viral, the giant dog of Vandale." Rowan sighed. "Is this about Nero?" "I believe that's what you call him, yes. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I've been doing this a while, documenting unexplained phenomena, tech anomalies, things the news won't touch. And your companion has sparked more interest than anything I've posted in months." Rowan didn't reply. "I'm not asking you to parade him in front of a camera," Miles added, "but people want to know. And if what I've heard is true, that this animal has military-level cognition, then you might be sitting on something bigger than you realize. I want to help you tell the right version of this story, before someone else writes it for you." Rowan rubbed his temples. "You don't know the half of it? That's why I want to talk. Fine, tomorrow, noon, neutral place, Valentine Park. Bring one camera, no drones." "You got it," Miles replied. That night, long after Tessa had left, Rowan sat on the floor near the fireplace, scrolling endlessly through the rest of Alara's files. Her voice appeared once in a video log, recorded from a lab terminal. She wore a white coat, her voice calm and precise. "Subject Alpha 3 shows increased retention of audio emotive responses. When I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, he laid down and placed his head on my knee. I believe he's associating tonal resonance with emotional safety. I've updated the empathy matrix to reflect this. I know what they want to use this for. I can't let them. Rowan stared at the screen, heart pounding. She knew. She'd been planning to stop them. Nero stirred beside him. Rowan placed a hand on the creature's broad back. "Did she tell you to come to me?" he asked softly. "Is that why you found me that night?" Nero didn't move, only thumped his tail once, gently against the floor. Across the street, shadows moved where they shouldn't. The man was patient, hunched behind the Edivane's fence line in blackout gear. He wasn't local. His accent betrayed him if he ever spoke. Known only as Rel, he was lean, angular, his skin pale beneath the night. Arca Labs had recruited him for jobs like this. Silent infiltration, observation, quiet extraction if needed. Rel had no love for science, but he did love clean orders and clean pay. He crept toward the back of Rowan's house, slipped a device the size of a coin from his sleeve, and placed it under the gutter near the bedroom window. A micro-transmitter, capable of relaying sound and limited thermal imaging back to Arca. Just as he turned, he froze. The hairs on the back of his neck lifted. From the tree line came a low sound, like a thunderstorm caught in a bottle. Nero emerged from the darkness, slow, silent, his body impossibly large, eyes burning like coals. Rel pulled a stun rod, flicking it on with a soft hiss of electric current. "Back, beast," he muttered. But Nero didn't back away. He leapt. Rel barely moved before the camera he wore shattered against the pavement. The rod clattered to the stones. He rolled out from under Nero's claws, scrambled to his feet, and bolted into the street, blood trailing from a deep gash in his arm. Nero stood in the driveway, watching, not chasing. And for the second time in 2 nights, Rowan woke to find his back door wide open and another device in pieces between Nero's teeth. By morning, Rowan and Tessa had reviewed the security footage from the motion lights outside. The man's face was never clearly shown, but the tactic was obvious. "They're escalating," Tessa said grimly. "They're trying to collect data before making a move." "They already made one," Rowan replied, looking down at the shattered bug. "This wasn't scouting. This was a message." And Nero answered it. Outside, Nero lay under the tree, head up, ears alert, watching, always watching. The hospital lights hummed with a cold steadiness, a kind of artificial calm that failed to soothe the storm building inside Jack Lawson. He stood in the corner of the pediatric legal office on the 2nd floor of St. Elora, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ranger lay beside him, tail flat against the linoleum floor, head resting on his front paws, as if understanding the weight of the silence. Across from Jack sat Sandra Miles, the hospital's legal counsel, a woman in her late 40s with meticulously styled blonde hair, pale skin, and the kind of sharp-featured beauty that warned of a mind sharper still. She wore a gray skirt suit, not a crease in sight, and glasses perched on the edge of her nose like a judge waiting to deliver a verdict. Sandra looked up from the file. "Mr. Lawson, as much as we sympathize with your intent, the law requires either proof of legal guardianship or parental consent to authorize a surgery of this magnitude." "She doesn't have a parent," Jack said, his voice low but burning. "She had a father who abandoned her at a bus stop. There's no official record of that. No social security number, no birth certificate. She's legally a ghost." Jack's hand curled into a fist. "She's not a ghost. She's a child, and she's dying." The tension crackled in the room. At that moment, Dr. Elise Rowan stepped in, her white coat fluttering slightly behind her. Her auburn hair was looser today, a few strands falling into her focused, hazel eyes. She glanced at Sandra before speaking. "Emily's condition has stabilized, but not for long. We need to operate in the next 72 hours. If we delay, we're choosing bureaucracy over survival." Sandra leaned back slightly, defensive. "I'm not the one choosing. The state sets the precedent. If this surgery fails and there's no legal guardian—" "I'll take full responsibility," Jack interrupted. "Put it in writing. Name me as guardian. I'll sign whatever releases you need. I'll pay for everything myself." Elise glanced between them. "It's possible to file an emergency guardianship petition. It won't be instant, but we can push it through in family court with urgency, if we have a lawyer willing to stand with us." Jack exhaled. "I know someone." That afternoon, Jack contacted Ben Whitaker, an old Army buddy turned family attorney. Ben was in his early 40s, clean-cut, African-American, with an easy smile and a suit that never seemed to wrinkle no matter how chaotic his day got. He had a calming presence, like someone who'd seen war but chose to build peace afterward. When Jack explained the situation, Ben didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way," he said. "Text me everything. We'll build the case before they even blink." Over the next 2 days, Jack never left the hospital. While Ben worked through legal channels, Jack and Ranger kept vigil by Emily's side. They brought her small gifts: a wooden rabbit carved by hand, a coloring book, a stuffed plush version of Ranger with a little badge sewed on its collar. Each evening, Jack would read aloud from a stack of old children's books, his voice low and steady. Sometimes, Emily stirred. Sometimes, she just listened with eyes closed. On the second night, when Ranger laid his head beside her pillow, she reached up and whispered, "Hero doggy," before drifting back to sleep. Jack blinked fast and looked away. On the third morning, something unexpected happened. A reporter showed up at the hospital. Her name was Talia Moreno, a local journalist known for human interest stories with bite. Mid-30s, petite with olive skin, tightly coiled black hair pulled into a bun, and a voice as clear as her questions were sharp. She had read Elise's medical statement, an anonymous leak, and reached out to Jack through Ben. She arrived with a small camera crew, polite but firm. "I heard there's a veteran willing to risk his name to save a girl no one else will claim." Jack met her in the lobby. "I'm not looking for attention." "But attention might be the only thing that moves the system fast enough," she replied. "Let me tell her story. Let people know what's happening here." Jack hesitated. Then he thought of Emily's heartbeat, of her little hand gripping Ranger's fur, of the red bag she still slept beside, even in the hospital bed. "Fine," he said, "but this is about her, not me." That evening the story aired. A dog, a soldier, and a little girl with no name. It opened with soft footage of Ranger lying beside Emily's bed, then cut to Jack speaking plainly about second chances, about not walking away when someone needs you. Talia's narration was spare, but powerful. The piece went viral. By morning, the hospital's phone lines were flooded. Offers of help poured in. Lawyers, nurses, families, veterans. Local officials issued statements. A state senator called Elise personally to say she would cut through the red tape. But none of that mattered to Jack until he saw Emily smile. Late that night, after the hospital hallway quieted and Ranger's steady breathing filled the room, Jack was reading Where the Wild Things Are. Emily stirred, looked up at him with drowsy eyes, and whispered, "Did Max ever come back?" Jack paused. He did. He came back, and someone was waiting for him. Emily smiled sleepily. Good. He reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be, both in temperature and in spirit. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting everything in pale tones. The walls were beige and unfeeling, the benches hard enough to discourage lingering. Jack Lawson stood at the center of the room, his shoulders square, a document clutched in his hand. He wore his cleanest shirt, light blue, tucked into worn khakis, and a brown leather jacket that still smelled faintly of cedar and dog fur. He hadn't shaved in 2 days, and his steel-gray eyes bore the weathered exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since Emily was admitted. Across from him, Judge Carla Brindley presided with a face carved from marble, late 50s, African-American, with hair cropped short, and streaks of silver that framed her temples like battle lines. She wore no jewelry beyond a simple gold ring and a pair of thin-framed reading glasses perched low on her nose. Her voice, when she spoke, was even and quiet, but carried the kind of finality that could end or save a life. "Mr. Lawson," she said, reviewing the paperwork before her, "you're seeking emergency guardianship of a minor without a birth certificate, social security record, or formal identification of any kind. On what grounds do you expect this court to override protocol?" Jack cleared his throat. "Because she's real. Because she's alive and sick and has no one else." "That's a moral position," Judge Brindley replied. "We're discussing legal precedent." Jack held up the letter in his hand, his voice firm. "Then maybe it's time precedent learns something from the real world." Ben Whitaker, seated beside Jack in a charcoal gray suit and thin black tie, leaned forward. "Your Honor, attached to our petition are medical affidavits from Dr. Elise Rowan, testimony from a social worker, and a statement from the responding EMT. We've also provided photographic documentation of Emily's condition upon hospital admission, along with a handwritten letter from Mr. Lawson and a drawing submitted by the child herself." Judge Brindley adjusted her glasses. "A drawing?" Ben nodded. "We believe it speaks to her mental and emotional connection to the petitioner." She opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of printer paper. The courtroom fell silent as she examined the crayon-colored picture. It showed a little girl holding hands with a large dog in front of a small blue house. The roof was uneven, the windows crooked, but in the corner of the page were words printed in shaky, blocky handwriting. "Me and Ranger live here now." Below it, in pencil, was Jack's letter. "She never asked me to save her. She never said she needed a home, but every night she reached for that dog like it was the last piece of the world that hadn't betrayed her. I lost my daughter once. I won't lose another." Brindley read it twice, then placed the paper aside without comment. "Is there any evidence, Your Honor," Ben pressed gently, "that she hasn't been abandoned?" "There is no confirmation either way," the judge replied, "but this court cannot establish legal custody on sentiment." Jack stepped forward. "Then, establish it on survival, because if she doesn't get surgery, none of this, laws, papers, hearings, will matter." There was a pause. Judge Brindley narrowed her eyes slightly. "The court will take the matter under advisement." The gavel fell. The hearing ended, no decision made. Outside the courthouse, the sky was white with low clouds, the air cold and still. A crowd had gathered. Journalists, neighbors, hospital staff, and strangers who had seen the news story now stood behind police tape. A camera light blinked red. Ranger sat obediently at Jack's side, unmoving. Jack stepped up to the small podium and looked out into the sea of expectant faces. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," he began, voice quiet but sure. "I didn't go looking for a child, but I found one, and she found me." He paused, glancing down briefly before continuing. "I'm not here to plead for permission to care. I'm not asking for applause. I just want the world to remember that every child deserves a name, a bed, a future, someone who doesn't leave." Behind him, Elise Rowan stood with her arms crossed, nodding softly. She'd come in scrubs, her coat pulled tight over her thin frame. Leroy was beside her, his denim jacket patched with duct tape, hands stuffed into his pockets. When the cameras panned to him, he simply said, "That little girl's been sleeping behind dumpsters for 2 weeks. If he ain't her father, I don't know who is." A nurse, Maya Singh, petite with jet black hair pulled into a bun, added, "She called the dog her hero. Not once did she ask for her dad. Not once, because she doesn't believe anyone's coming for her, except him." That night, the story reached national news. The girl with no name and the soldier who refused to leave. Online, support flooded in. Messages from veterans, pediatric nurses, teachers. People shared stories of being foster kids, of being saved late, of being left too long. And among them was a letter from a woman in Austin who had grown up in the system. She wrote, "If someone had fought for me the way Jack Lawson fights for that girl, maybe I wouldn't have spent 18 years thinking I was invisible." Back in the hospital, Jack returned to Emily's room. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Emily was awake, coloring another page. She looked up and asked, "Did they say yes?" Jack shook his head. "Not yet, but a lot of people are listening now." Emily held up her drawing. This one showed her, Jack, and Ranger under a rainbow. She pointed at a figure beside them. "That's the judge. I drew her smiling." Jack smiled faintly. "Let's hope she does." It was a cool morning in early spring, the kind of morning that smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. The rain had passed in the night, leaving droplets clinging to leaves and the old wooden railing on the porch. Jack Lawson stood on that porch, arms crossed loosely over his chest, a mug of steaming coffee in hand. His hair was damp from the mist, and he hadn't bothered with a jacket despite the chill. The scars on his knuckles felt less sharp in the morning light, and for the first time in years, the silence around him wasn't heavy. Behind him, inside the modest house with creaky floorboards and windows that whistled in the wind, laughter bounced off the walls. Emily. She was singing softly, a tune Jack didn't recognize, off-key, but bright. Her small voice carried warmth into the corners of the home that had once sat in stillness. The court had ruled in their favor 2 weeks ago. The emergency guardianship was approved after a whirlwind of media pressure, legal testimony, and community outrage. Dr. Elise Rowan, Leroy, Nurse Maya, and even paramedic Marcus Brennan had all spoken or written letters on Jack's behalf. Judge Brinley, the same woman who'd refused the initial petition, signed the papers herself with the words, "Sometimes justice comes wrapped in crayons and courage." Emily Grace was now Emily Lawson. The surgery had been a success. Elise had led a team of 3 in the 6-hour procedure, her eyes unwavering and her hands steady. There had been a tense few days in recovery, with close monitoring and long hours, but Emily had pulled through. Her body was weak, but her spirit had returned faster than anyone expected. Jack had taken her home just 10 days after the operation. His home. He'd spent those nights preparing her room, repainting the walls soft teal, adding glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, placing a bookshelf near the window filled with donated children's books and small handmade wooden robots he'd carved while waiting in the hospital. One bore a crooked smile and a sticker that read, "Ranger's Buddy." The red plastic bag, the one that had followed Emily through every dark place, now hung from a low oak branch in the front yard, gently fluttering in the breeze. It had been her idea. "I want it to stay right there," she'd said, "so I remember I don't need to run anymore." The house, once quiet to the point of haunting, now held the soft hum of life. There were footsteps down the hallway, cookie crumbs on the kitchen floor, small socks hidden behind cushions, and a coat rack with a tiny pink jacket next to Jack's field jacket. Even Ranger had changed. He followed Emily like a shadow, tail wagging, protective but patient. He let her rest her head on him during naps and sat beside her when she colored, occasionally thudding his paw down when she laughed too hard. That morning, Emily emerged from her room in blue pajamas covered in cartoon wolves. Her hair had started to grow thicker, shinier. She carried a book in one hand and a wooden robot in the other. "Can we read it again?" she asked. Jack grinned. "That depends. Are you going to fall asleep before we get past page 5 this time?" "I was just pretending last night," she said, climbing onto the couch. Ranger followed and curled up at her feet, tail wrapping around like a blanket. Jack took the book, Where the Wild Things Are, and settled in beside her. They read slowly, his voice softer than usual, as if afraid to scare the peace. Outside, the mail truck rumbled by. Birds chirped on wet branches. In the backyard, the swing jack had hung from the old tree swayed slightly, waiting for its next use. At one point, Emily looked up from the book and asked, "Do I get to keep your name forever?" Jack paused. "If you want it." She nodded. "I think Lawson sounds brave." "It is," he said. "You make it that way." Later that afternoon, Mark Reyes came by, his pickup rolling in with music playing low and windows fogged from the heater. He stepped out in his usual faded jeans and olive green hoodie, a box of oatmeal cookies under one arm, and a vet tech smile on his face. His short-cropped hair was messier than usual, and he had bags under his eyes that spoke of late-night emergency calls. But his grin was wide. "She's still calling Ranger her hero doggy?" he asked as he handed Jack the box. "Only when she's not calling me Captain Bossy," Jack replied. Emily peeked out from the door and waved. "Hi, Uncle Mark." Mark bowed dramatically. "Princess Emily." The two men shared a look, one of those silent exchanges born of shared war, shared loss, and now something else entirely: healing. That night, Jack tucked Emily into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Her stuffed version of Ranger sat by her pillow. The real one lay curled under the bed, his breathing slow and deep. Jack turned to leave, but Emily reached for his hand. "Don't forget the story." He sat back down. She handed him a different book this time, The Velveteen Rabbit. He read slowly, carefully, his voice dipping with emotion at each line about becoming real, about love that lasted beyond scars. When he looked up, Emily was asleep, her breathing even. Jack stayed a while longer, watching. It was the first time in years he didn't feel like a man haunted by silence. In that small room, in that modest house, with a child asleep beside a loyal dog and a heart stitched back together not just by surgery, but by kindness, Jack finally believed in something he hadn't dared to name: home. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. They come in the shape of a dog's bark at midnight, in the quiet footsteps of a soldier who refuses to walk away, or in the fragile voice of a little girl who dares to trust again. Emily didn't ask for a hero. She just needed one person who stayed. And in return, she gave Jack what he thought he had lost forever, a reason to hope. Maybe this was no coincidence. Maybe God still places people exactly where they need to be, even when they're broken, even when they feel forgotten. So, tonight, wherever you are, hold on to this truth. No child is ever truly invisible. Not to God, not to the right heart. May the Lord bless every viewer watching this story. May He guide you to the ones who need your light the most. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on more journeys of love, loss, and redemption. Together, let's be the miracle someone's waiting for.